More updates for you on another crisis situation as we turn our attention to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. A senior Ukrainian official in the southern region says at least 2 people have been killed following an overnight Russian attack on Zaporizhia. Head of Zaporizhia Military Administration Yuri Malashko says the victims were a 55-year-old man from Mala Tokmachka and a 70-year-old resident of Huliapol. The 2 villages lie close to the southern front line where Ukrainian forces are conducting a counteroffensive to reclaim territory from Russian forces occupying parts of the region. He says Russia fired 98 times at 24 settlements in Zaporizhia over the past day. The attacks involved an aircraft, unmanned aerial vehicles, 5 MLRS rocket systems, and 88 artillery strikes on frontline villages. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces are containing Russian forces on the eastern front and have not allowed a single meter of Russian advances, and that's according to its Deputy Prime Minister, Hanna Maliar. Maliar wrote on the Telegraph that which partly reads, "Our defense forces continue to effectively contain advances by Russian troops," referring to 4 key sectors in the east, including Lyman further north, where officials say Russian forces have been active. Ukrainian forces on the southern front, where several villages were captured last week, were gradually moving forward as well. According to officials, we have had partial success. We are pushing back the enemy and leveling the front line. Meanwhile, Russia says Ukrainian forces in eastern and southern Ukraine are temporarily limiting their efforts after launching a highly anticipated counteroffensive 2 weeks ago. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said after conducting active hostilities over the past 16 days and having suffered significant losses, the enemy has reduced its activity and is currently regrouping. Mr. Shoigu adds that Western military aid for Ukraine was not seriously affecting the battlefield, despite the Kremlin routinely saying deliveries prolong and escalate the conflict. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has argued several times within the last week that the Ukrainian counteroffensive is a failure, told the Security Council meeting yesterday that Kyiv's forces had an offensive potential. And Ukrainian missiles have struck one of the few bridges linking the Crimea Peninsula with the Ukrainian mainland early on Thursday, cutting one of the main supply routes for Russian occupation forces in southern Ukraine as Kyiv pushes to drive them out. Russia's state-owned media cited investigators saying that 4 missiles were fired by Ukrainian forces at the bridge. Transport officials installed by Moscow were also quoted as saying that repairs could take weeks. Traffic queues built up as many bus routes were cancelled or severely delayed. Ukraine is attacking Russian supplies to disrupt Moscow's defense of occupied territory in the south. In the meantime, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia has formed special groups to collect and hide bodies of people killed in the aftermath of the breach of the Kakhovka Dam in southern Ukraine. Ukraine and Russia have accused each other of destroying the dam in Kherson region, partly occupied by Russian troops. Mr. Zelensky described the situation in Russian-occupied parts of the region as catastrophic, to put it mildly.
Of course, we also have information about what is happening in the occupied part of the Kherson region. To describe it, even the word catastrophe is not strong enough. The Russian evil has formed special groups there to remove and obviously hide the victims' bodies.
U.S. President Joe Biden and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi have held a new era in their country's relationship after the White House rolled out the red carpet for the Indian Prime Minister yesterday. Though the countries are not formal treaty-bound allies and India has long relished its independence, Washington wants Delhi to be a strategic counterweight to China. During Mr. Modi's visits, the two countries announced agreements on semiconductors, critical minerals, technology, space cooperation, defense cooperation, and sales.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for your partnership and your friendship. And to all, please join me in a toast, but I don't know if we have any glasses. Please join me in a toast. Here it comes. The good news for both of us, neither of us drink. That is what? Ginger ale, okay. Mr. Prime Minister, I had an Irish grandfather named Ambrose Finnegan, and he used to say that when you give a toast and you don't have any alcohol in your glass, you must do it with your left hand. You think I'm kidding, I'm not. Toast to our partnership, to our people, to the possibilities that lie ahead, to two great friends, two great nations, and two great powers. Cheers.
प्रधानमंत्री जी आपकी साझेदारी के लिए धन्यवाद आप सभी को मेरा
Meanwhile, Mr. Modi has promised to work towards peace in Ukraine. On the visit to Washington, there has hoped for New Delhi to break with Russia. Speaking to reporters at the White House, he said that from the very beginning of events in Ukraine, India has put an emphasis on resolution of disputes, dialogue, and diplomacy. We are completely ready to contribute in any way we can to restore peace. Welcome back. The United Nations has added Russia to a global list of offenders for killing 136 children in Ukraine in 2022. According to a UN security report, Russian forces and affiliated groups maimed 518 children and carried out 480 attacks on Ukrainian schools and hospitals. Russia's military also used 91 children as human shields. Russia has denied targeting civilians. The UN also accused the Ukrainian military of killing 80 children, injuring 175, and carrying out 212 attacks on schools and hospitals, but it wasn't added to the global list of offenders. The report was written by a special representative for children and armed conflict to the UN Secretary General Virginia Gamba. Last month, she reportedly visited Ukraine and Russia, where she met with Maria Lvova-Belova, the Russian official wanted by the International Criminal Court for an alleged scheme to deport Ukrainian children to Russia. According to the Ukrainian government's portal Children of War, Russia's full-scale invasion has killed 490 children and wounded 1,028 as of June 2023. Staying with the war in Ukraine, Australia Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says a contested site of a proposed Russian embassy was secure after it emerged a Russian diplomat was squatting on the land following the government's decision to cancel the lease. Earlier this month, Australia passed a law to prevent Russia from moving its embassy from Canberra suburb to a prime site close to the parliament and the Chinese embassy, citing national security concerns. However, the Russian embassy did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Moscow earlier this week barred 48 Australians from entering Russia in what it said was retaliation for Australia's own long-running sanctions regime against the country.
The national security threat that was represented by a Russian embassy on site are not the same as some bloke standing on a blade of grass on the site that we don't see really as a threat to our national security. We anticipated that Russia would not be happy with our response. We expected that, but we're very confident of our position, and processes are underway for the Commonwealth to formalise possession of the site.
Let's bring in the VOA's correspondent, Anna Chernikova, who joins me from Kyiv. I hope I have Anna with me. Well, Anna, give us updates on the Russian missile strike on Zaporizhzhia.
Good evening. Unfortunately, the city of Zaporizhzhia and Zaporizhzhia region in general are constantly under shelling, and for months now, not only this past days or today, but today it was another attack, and actually it's ongoing attacks starting from the morning. The shelling of different areas in the Zaporizhzhia region, and for the moment we know about 1 victim and 4 people injured. I can tell that, for now, situation remains just very tough in terms of the risks for civil society. All people who are injured and 1 killed are civilians, so it's not military targets or anything like that. In terms of the targets, there are damages of very different parts of the country, considering also that Zaporizhzhia is a very industrial city, but also private sectors, residential areas, and so on and so forth, infrastructure. So the city just constantly under pretty heavy shelling, and the damages of the civilian infrastructure has a very high rate in here. So this is what we have for today and for this particular moment.
The Russian officials say Ukrainian missiles struck one of the few bridges linking the Crimean Peninsula. Has this claim been verified? Has Ukraine claimed responsibility for this particular attack?
We don't have confirmation from the Ukrainian authorities for this attack, but we're hearing about, and we're getting footage, and also there is also now available the satellite footage that apparently the bridge is damaged, and a new Panton bridge was seen today on the satellite images. So this is Kherson region, this part. It's at the entrance to Crimea, but it's like the Kherson region area. And this comes in line and additionally to the attacks which are happening in Kherson region in other parts of the region, and we don't. So basically, the occupied territory experience shelling, experience attacks, explosions. We don't really have like official confirmations from the Ukrainian authorities, but it is kind of coming, in line with the counteroffensive actions which are also happening along the front line. So it looks like a kind of a part of all it together, but but for the moment there is no particularly direct confirmations from the Ukrainian authorities. However, of course, this helps to add certain advantage to the Ukrainian counteroffensive when such things are happening. Today, for instance, we've heard that, and yesterday and today we've heard that there were explosions at other parts of Kherson region, and Russian forces, manpower, and Russian equipment and ammunition depots were targeted.
Let's talk about this counteroffensive. Ukraine's armed forces said that they halted a Russian offensive and are advancing in the south. Is there evidence of this victory, or is this another back and forth situation as we've seen played out in Bakhmut?
Two things here. It's too early to talk about any victories for this point, for this moment, because it just, as President Zelensky said, it's only the beginning, and more active actions will be seen in the future. And today, actually, the head of the Ukrainian land forces also said similar. He made similar remarks. saying that main power, Ukrainian army power, has not been used yet in this action. So the main part of counteroffensive is still to come. In terms of your second part of your question about back and forth and situation similar to Bakhmut, I think that it's not correct to compare this particular counteroffensive actions to Bakhmut defense, because Bakhmut had, so basically the defense of the city of Bakhmut had a very strategic meaning in terms of saving of time for Ukrainian forces and, of course, saving of the territory, because Russian advance in Bakhmut would mean additional artillery distance shelling for Russian forces of other parts of Donetsk region, such as Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, and so on. Here in Kherson region, we see that, and the Zaporizhia region, so basically the front line is kind of connected, connects these two regions. We see that at this point, at least, there are certain localized activities happening, and there are certain positive results for Ukrainian army that have been confirmed by the Ukrainian military officials and also by the Institute for the Study of War in their latest reports. They also have confirmation that actually certain territories have been liberated in Kherson and Zaporizhia area and in Donetsk area as well. So but this is not something, huge, not much. So for now, it looks like certain preparation actions. And again, according to experts, this is something to, so basically for everyone, it's time to wait now and to wait for certain real results. And maybe then it would be appropriate to talk about victory for either Ukrainian forces or Russian forces. But at this point, we do have confirmation of certain limited advances and limited success of the Ukrainian army. But again, Russian forces keep the defense, and well, they are prepared quite well for the defense.
Right. So let's talk about more on that. Many countries have been trying to, talk about peace between Russia and Ukraine, saying that they will do anything and they will try and mediate the process. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is the latest that has promised to work towards peace in Ukraine. He said this on a visit to Washington to meet with U.S. President Joe Biden. So how is this going? What are the latest attempts to mediate in this crisis? Of course, Russia has said that if only Ukraine will, give up fighting, then President Putin said he'll be ready to sit down to even take a look at what's on the table to even attempt to, at a ceasefire. So what's the latest on this?
I think it would be correct to put it this way, and this also was stated by the President of Ukraine and also by different international allies. So for the moment, what we see that a lot of countries, from different continents, are trying to become a part of this global future peace negotiation, and meaning that some countries propose their road plan, some countries propose their help. What is important for Ukraine from Ukrainian perspective, and this was stated already a lot of times by the president, by Ukrainian officials and military officials as well, actually, that first of all, Ukraine will not give up at the battlefield, and Ukraine understands that battlefield is currently the main negotiation table. What is important, as President Zelensky mentioned a lot of times as well, that more countries are joining this future peaceful negotiations better, more continents better, but for Ukraine, it's important that all these peace negotiations are based on the Ukrainian peace plan. These negotiations are based on the one main point in this peace plan, which was presented by Ukrainian officials, that Ukraine will not give up territories, and this is because this is not an option. And Ukraine wants certain security, future security guarantees, because Ukraine understands that, and Ukraine has already gone through this, that if now this war, this conflict zone, let's call it war. This war is frozen. This would mean that Russia would just do the same in years, in a couple of years, whatever time they need to prepare for new offense. So for Ukraine, it's not an option from Ukrainian perspective to freeze this conflict, to freeze this war, and not an option to give up territories, because this would not help for long-term peace. This is how Ukraine sees it for now. And everyone who is trying to become a part of this future peace negotiations, for Ukraine, it's important that everyone understand that. So, but in general, it's really good and positive for Ukraine that more and more countries are joining and interested in this. In real peace. This is how also Ukrainian officials call it, like real peace, not just artificial peace that would not last long. So this is important. This is probably the most important to understand, and it's the most important for also for understanding of the desires of different countries and from different continents when certain things are proposed and negotiated. But again, we don't, of course, know a lot of behind the doors, what's going on behind the doors, and maybe there is something additional which is negotiated already. But for now, what we know officially, we can just, talk about that.
Right. Anna, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.